Hello! We're here. We're finally here. I'm embarrassed. It's been a while. It's been a long time since I've made one of these. But hey, look, things happen. This is not my day job. I have a day job, and I just get very busy and I get very lazy. So I literally haven't made a video, I think, since February of 2023. But we're here now, and that's what matters, and I really want to get back into it this year. Hi, if you have never seen one of my videos before, or if you're not one of my friends and family watching one of these, my name's Catherine, and I want to talk about books. We're here to talk about my fall, my whole 2023 year of reading. If I went into depth about each one of these books, you'd be here for days. You would have to camp out and watch this for days. And I don't really want to do that, so I thought instead I would just show like kind of the highlights of each book I read for the whole year. Do a little speed dating, if you will. I put on my cute little outfit today because we're going on a little speed date around. It was a great year. I read some fabulous books. I had the pleasure of reading some great classics, authors I've never read before, just great regular fiction, nonfiction, the works. I read 47 books out of my 45 goal, so I was very happy with that. I've set my new goal at 55. We'll see. But I'm very excited to go over these. These were some great books, and I'm really excited. So, without further ado, here are my books for 2023. Dombey and Son. Technically, this book I started in fall. No, not fall. I keep saying fall. I started this technically in December of 2022, and then I finished it in January 2023. So we count that. We count that as a 2023 read because it was finished at the very beginning of the year. And it's Dombey and Son. For a while, I was reading Charles Dickens in order. Almost every other month, I would read the next Charles Dickens book in order of publication. And I gotta say, I love Charles Dickens, but I was getting a little sick of him. I was getting a little tired of his shtick. But this is Dombey and Son. Honestly, though I was getting sick of his shtick, this was very good. The ending made me weep. Like, actually weep. It was a beautiful ending. And this is a great one. I think this is one that gets kind of forgotten, but it's great. Basically tells the story of Dombey and his firm Dombey and Sons, and all he's looking for is a male heir to carry on the name Dombey and Son and to take up the family business. But he's left with his daughter Florence, who is sweet as can be, but alas, she is a woman in Victorian England who would not be able to carry on the name. And it's about their relationship, and it's about the consequences of the coldness of the father towards the daughter, and all of these other things obviously happen because Dickens literally has 10 side plots. But great book. Honestly, very, very well done. We love a good Dickens. So this, starting off the year right, this was a 5-star read. Dombey and Son. Anyway, next. This was a reread for me, so I read this with a book club that I'm a part of at Women and Children First in Chicago. Great bookstore. This was a reread for me, but I'm so glad we read this again because I think this is the kind of book that does warrant a reread, and it is A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. Definitely the first time I read this, I did not pick up on as much because I was getting used to Virginia Woolf's very famous stream of consciousness style. I was a little like, where are we? But once I actually mined through all of the stream of consciousness, the ideas in here are so brilliant. This is basically Virginia Woolf's nonfiction essays. It was originally delivered to a women's college, and then they compiled them into a book. And it's the theory that women have not been as successful as writers and as artists because they often did not have money of their own, and they did not have a room of one's own to create in. And that's kind of the thesis and the backbone of the entire collection of essays. And it's just fantastic. This is a 5-star read for me, especially the second time around, because I just got so much out of this. Like, there was so much that I could really mine because it was my second time. And again, the ending just gets me. The ending also makes me cry, especially as a woman that does like to create and is in a room of one's own to create. Literally living the dream. So this is fantastic. If you are into Virginia Woolf, I wouldn't say this should be your first Virginia Woolf, but if you are into her, pick her up. I love her. Love Virginia Woolf. I love you. Next was a bit out of my comfort zone. I'm not really a poetry girly. I think I'm trying to dabble, but I'm not a poetry girly. So this is not technically poetry. It is a novel in verse that's written by a very famous poet, and it's Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson. This was gorgeous. This is basically a retelling of a Greek myth Geryon, who is like a young boy, winged red monster, is exiled to this island to live alone, and it's about his relationship with the very famous Greek myth Hercules. It's a little gay, very beautiful, very moving, very, very sad, but I would definitely reread this again. This definitely warrants a reread, but excellent. I believe I gave this 4 stars. Autobiography of Red. Moving along. I think I'd said in a video that I want to apologize to Ernest Hemingway because I hated Hemingway when I was younger. His prose just didn't do anything for me. But I read this year A Farewell to Arms, and I owe him an apology. This was so excellent. So excellent. This is basically about an American soldier on the World War I front. He starts off in Italy, I believe, and he falls in love with this English nurse. And it's about their relationship and how they struggle through the World War I front. And it will kill you. This literally has an ending that I can't say anything else, just that it will rip the rug out from under you and you've fallen on your butt and you're like, what happened? Sobbed. I really sobbed at the beginning of 2023. It really was an emotional time. This is so excellent. And so I'm sorry, Ernest Hemingway. I do owe him an apology. I'm sorry, because his books are excellent. I needed a little bit more maturity because the last time I read him I was 14. So excellent. Farewell to Arms. Next up is nonfiction. An excellent nonfiction at that. It is Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell. Great cover, by the way. I mean, this pulled me in right away. And also just the word cult in it, I'm there. I find the topic of cults to be absolutely fascinating. And this is specifically a book that talks about how cults or cult-like businesses, cult-like groups use language in order to get people to come in and get people to stay. And it's laid out very well in that it starts with very obvious cults. So the chapters start with Jonestown, it starts with Heaven's Gate, and then each chapter goes into less and less obvious cults. So MLMs, Scientology, things that are cult-like, let's just say, that use language to get people in, and how this type of language is very pervasive in American society. This is great. This is very readable. If you don't like nonfiction, I would say pick this one up because it doesn't feel like nonfiction. I say this in the best way possible. It's like picking up a BuzzFeed article. I think that could be taken the wrong way, but I mean that in a good thing. It's very readable, digestible. She's almost talking to you like she's a friend, but you still trust her as an authority. Does it do a deep dive into cults? No, this is a little bit more surface level. If you really want to know about Jonestown and Heaven's Gate and Scientology, you'll have to do further reading. That's not really the point. But overall, great. This was a really great read. Next, we have a Japanese novel. I love Japanese novels. I love Japanese writing. They made the haiku, right? Which is 3 lines of poetry that says so little, but yet says so much. And I find a lot of their novels to be similar. Something will just be said and it's very yeah, okay, I guess that's an obvious statement, or I guess that doesn't say much, but you read it again or you put it in the context of the whole story, which again, doesn't have that much going on, but you're like, oh. And that was definitely the case with Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata. Excellent. Excellent. This is the story about a Japanese businessman. He is married, but he likes to go to this, in the winter, in the snow time, he likes to go to this resort and kind of just get away from everything. And he has a relationship with a woman who isn't quite a geisha, kind of becomes a geisha. She's a bit of a hostess kind of situation. And it's about their relationship. And it's such an odd relationship. It's very hard to decipher what exactly is going on between them. But that's what makes it so satisfying to read, because you're like, oh my god, what is this? And the ending is just so ambiguous. It just is beautiful. And I definitely want to read more Kawabata after this. I really liked this copy too. It's very old. It's got the yellowing pages. But this was excellent. Definitely read in the winter because there's a lot of snow imagery, quiet snow imagery. So this is definitely a good winter book. Definitely pick it up. Next we have the first book I read of the year. That was the first book that I read that just made me go, oh, well, okay. I was kind of happy it was over because I was like, I'm kind of ready to move on. And that was John Steinbeck's Once There Was a War. I love John Steinbeck's fiction. East of Eden, bellissimo, perfect writing. Grapes Wrath, great book. So his fiction I love. This is the first nonfiction of his I've read. He was a World War II newspaper correspondent. So these are stories that he wrote while he's on the front and he was sending them back to the newspaper. So these are stories as the war is unfolding. And you know, it's okay. They're okay. There were some that stuck with me. There was like a ghost story one that was really good. But everything else is like, honestly, I read this back in February. Like, I kind of forget a lot of it, which is not great. You don't want that quality. I think these stories could have been edited more. I say that though with an asterisk because he literally was writing these. I just imagine like chaos around him and he's just like, oh, I've got to send this out. Like he truly, I don't think, had the time to edit, but I think some of them could have been edited a little bit more. And this was just okay. Like it was just okay. So once there was a war. Next was a book that I don't think I've talked about in a video because I think I just referenced that I was going to read it with my two friends, Yona and Jess. We started a little like friends book club, and that is Angels Before Man by Raphael Nicolas. Crazy. This was crazy. And I mean by that crazy good because for a debut novel, this is the author's debut novel, I think they did a fantastic job. The language in this is unbelievably beautiful. Like, I like to say bejeweled. Like it almost was like rich brocade fabric type writing. It was like so luscious and rich, and it worked for the environment for this 100%. So this is a retelling of the story of Lucifer, the fall of Lucifer, which if you've been raised in the Judeo-Christian discipline, you know a little bit about Lucifer. He fell from heaven. He was an angel. He fell from heaven. He became Satan. And this is a version where he and the angel Michael are in love. And it was lovely. Like a lot of their relationship and a lot of the descriptions of him figuring out what love is and falling in love was so beautiful. Also just so tragic. Like this was so tragic, and the God figure in this book is just so complex and frightening. Kind of a Catholic God, like a scary God. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. Do I think it was like the best thing I've ever read? It felt a little fan fiction-y at times. I will give it that. But also this is the author's first novel, and honestly I think for a first novel they did a fantastic job. Love it. Angels Before Man. The next was one that I also was just not, I just kind of went, eh. That's Metropolitan Stories by Christine Coulson. I found this book at the Newberry Library book sale in 2022, and I was very excited for this because I love the Met in New York. This was, it was okay. It was okay. I thought for some reason that these were going to be true stories, like it was going to be a little bit more of a memoir, like memoir short story kind of blend, but these were just straight up fiction. This is the problem with short story collections. They're not always going to be amazing. Like I think the only time I've read like an essay collection or short story collection where I was like, every one is a banger, was Slouching Towards Bethlehem by Joan Didion. I love Joan Didion, so I just thought all of those were great. This is kind of falls into the classic short story thing where some were great and some you're like, I couldn't remember that if you asked me. Like I really don't have too much to say about this. The writing was okay. It's gonna go in the little free library. Sorry. Excuse me. I'm getting over like a crazy cold. So the first time I filmed this, oh, I looked at her and went, ah, who is that? I looked terrible. So we're redoing it when I feel a little bit better. Next up was also a reread for me. It was a reread for my book club, and I was a little like, oh, is this the classic I want to reread right now? Like, I don't think this is the one I want to go to right now, but I did anyway, and I am so glad I did. Like, I am so, so glad that I reread this because I think it was the right time for me to read this book, and that is Vette by Charlotte Bronte. Obviously, I have Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books. It is deep in my heart. And Vette is kind of like, I read it in college. I read it on spring break in Miami. What a beach read. And I remember being like, okay, like, it was good, but it's no Jane Eyre. And it's because this book is more muted than Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre has the drama, and this just simply doesn't have that same drama. It has an older heroine who I think is a little bit more blasé. Like she will admit she's blasé, and she doesn't really care what you think of her. So she's kind of like, yeah, here's my story. Take it or leave it. As like a later 20s, I think I'm around the same age as that. I think she's supposed to be around 27. I was like, oh, yes. Like I related to her so much more. The fact that she would like isolate from people when she thought she was a burden. Whomst? Not me doing that. There were things I related to a lot more because she was more mature. and I was more mature when I came back to this. Basically, this is a story about Lucy Snow. She is an English woman. She's kind of like, she has no prospects, she has no family, she has no money. So in those days, as a woman, you were kind of, for lack of a better word, you were fucked. So she decides to go to this town, Vette, which is supposed to be like Brussels in Belgium. It's a fictional town. And she winds up becoming a teacher. And it's just about her life being a teacher in this town and making her way. Very good. Very, very good. And honestly, I gave it a higher rating this time because I think I just appreciated her a lot more this time around. She's a heroine who doesn't care about you at all, but also I cared about her. I was like, actually, Lucy, I care about you. So I do recommend Vette if you can get your hands on it. However, disclaimer, and maybe something I'll talk about later, hate the love interest. Hate the love interest of this book. Hate him. Hate, hate, hate. I think he's terrible. And this is truly someone where I want to shake her and be like, just go talk to more men, because you'll find someone else better. She kind of took the guy who was just there. Which happens in Victorian novels, because how many men did you meet on the daily? Don't like the male love interest, but otherwise, great book. I get heated about that man. Next up was the first time that I've read this book. It is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. Rainer Maria Rilke is a romantic German poet, and basically a young poet, he would get letters, or Rilke would get letters, from all sorts of people, because by the time he was writing these, he was already pretty established and pretty famous, and he would write letters back to people. And this particular poet who reached out to him, I think just touched him, because he was a young poet who would send Rilke poems and be like, are these any good? Should I be a poet? I don't know what to do. Like classic, you know, I think the poet was probably like 17 or 18 when he was sending Rilke these letters. And Rilke just sends these gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous responses back. Like, you read them and you're like, wow, this man like really took the time for this person he didn't know. And that to me is so touching. Like, it's so unbelievable. Excellent. This is great for anyone. Like, even if you're not a poet, I'd say if you have any kind of interest in the arts, any artistic inclinations, and you're feeling a little stuck, or you're a little like, I don't know what I'm doing, which is me most of the time, and this is great. This provides great solace. I think this is a good one to have just to go to every so often. Like, keep it on your bedside. If you're feeling a little weird, just like flip through it, and it's very comforting. This certainly, I think, for me, warrants a reread. I think at some point I'll go back to it and like when I'm really in need of it, and I think it'll be there for me. But it was there for me when I read it this first time, and honestly, lovely. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Letters to a Young Poet. Next is Alison Bechdel's The Secret to Superhuman Strength. Nice big book. We like a big book sometimes. This is so good. I read Fun Home at the very end of 2022, and I loved it. Great musical, by the way, too, if you're into that. This is specifically Bechdel's kind of exploration into her relationship with physical exercise. She's done all sorts of physical exercise throughout her life. She's done karate, she's skied, she's done yoga, she's done all sorts of stuff, and it's about her relationship with physical exercise and how it also has related to her creativity and just her overall growth as a person. And it's structured really well. It goes like from her, each section is kind of like her 10s, her 20s, her 30s, her 40s, 50s, and just how her relationship also with her body, physical exercise, with her creativity, how that's all evolved and changed throughout her decades. And it's just great. Like, she's just a great writer. Her drawings, I love her illustrations. I just think they're so fun. They're very funny, it's very wry, and just very, like, she's very self-aware, very smart. It's a very, very smart book, and she herself is obviously a very smart woman. But yeah, that's Secret to Superhuman Strength. I would say read Fun Home first, because that gives you a great foundation into her childhood, where this is more, this has parts of her childhood, obviously, but it also goes more into her adulthood and her adult relationships. So, fabulous. Ooh, the next book? Oh! Kindred by Octavia Butler. Baby, if you want something that's so expert, like a plot that is so expertly woven and mastered, and ideas that are just like so frightening that it gives you the hives like thinking about it, then go to Octavia Butler. This is the first Octavia Butler I've ever read. I decided to pick this up because I've like always heard her name kind of buzzing around, and I just had never picked her up. And so I thought Kindred would be a good place to start, and I would agree this is a good place to start because I think it just encapsulates her style to a T. This is basically about Dana. She is a black woman in the 70s, and she moves to a new house with her partner, who's a white male. They move to this house, and without warning, no explanation, she is blasted back in time to, I think it's around 1812, to 1812 Maryland. She's a black woman from the 70s being transported back in time to 1812 Maryland. If I think about that for too long, like, I get so scared, because I can't even imagine. Like, and this book did such a great job in making you imagine, because you're like, no, this is bad. This is really bad. And basically, she keeps getting pulled back in time to go save her white ancestor, who is the son of a white slave owner. And it's about how they kind of form a friendship. It's a complex relationship, to say the least, and how she is just trying to, like, stop going back in time and to just, like, leave things in the past and the way they are and move forward. So good. So good. The writing is very, like, it's not very flowery, it's very cut and dry, but that's because she's like, we don't have time. There's a plot I gotta get to, we're moving at the speed of light, and it's speculative, so it's much more about the ideas that are being put out than the actual language itself. But that, for this, lent itself so well, and the plot was so well done. Kindred! Octavia Butler! I'm reading Parable of the Sower with my book club coming up, and I'm so excited. Next up, we have another Dickens. Who would have thought? Who would have thunk I'm reading another Dickens? This is the next one in his publication history. It is David Copperfield. By this time, I read this in March, I was like, I've had enough. Like, no more Dickens. We're done. I've read too much. Too many orphans. Too many terrible step-parents. Too many jolly old surrogate fathers. We're done. Like, I've had enough. But even though I was done with Dickens, like, I was literally looking at him being like, cut the crap. Like, I see right through what you're doing. I still loved this. I still really loved this. And I still cried at the end, because I always seem to cry at the end of a Dickens novel. Unless it's Martin Chuzzlewit, in which I didn't finish it, because it was so bad. This was excellent. This was excellent. I read this specifically for the Game of Tomes book club with YouTubers Emma and Carolyn Marie Reads. They hated it. They really did not like this book, but I was sitting there like, I like it. Like, I really liked it. But this was excellent. This was excellent. David Copperfield is an orphan, and it's about him just making his way through the world, which is a classic theme of Dickens. But it's great. There's some really lovable characters in this one, and it's Dickens finally figuring out how to, like, string all those plots together in a much more cohesive way, and everything really gets wrapped up, and characters aren't forgotten about and then brought back like we saw in Old Curiosity Shop. So, honestly, I do really recommend David Copperfield, and at some point when I do read more Dickens, I think I'll do, like, a Dickens ranked video, because then that will give you more ideas, because there's so much to talk about in here. We'd be here all day if I talked about the old DC. This one I picked for my book club. I picked it, and it was very popular, and everybody showed up, and everybody liked it. So I felt very happy I chose this. It's another Japanese book, because, like I mentioned, I love Japanese literature. And this is Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. I love this cover, because I love her little outfit. Like, I want that dress. She looks so cute. This is about this young woman who lives with her grandmother, and her grandmother passes away, and that's kind of her last family member. So she's also an orphan now, and a bit adrift. She doesn't really know what to do, and she's grieving. And this old friend of hers, this old classmate friend of hers, says, hey, why don't you just come live with me and my mom? Like, just come live with us. You seem like you need a friend. And she goes, okay, like, sure. And it's just about her, like, going through the grieving process in this very comfortable home of this man that she's friends with and his mother, who is actually a transgender character. She's a transgender woman, which for 90s, this is early 90s, Japan, having, like, a sympathetic, not like, ooh, look at this character, transgender character, I think that's fantastic. And this is just so lovely. Again, like the Japanese are so able to do, just so simple and quiet, but moving, like, so moving. There's also a companion story in here that also deals with grief and death. I believe it's called Moonlight Shadow. I would recommend, if you can get an edition with both, which this one does, to read both, because they're both excellent. This is great if you are going through a lot of loss and you need just some comfort. I thought this was excellent. So, Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. This book. So good. I read this right before I went to Korea on a trip, which was excellent. I should have taken video, and I just was not on my A game at that point. I read this right before I went on my trip, and I am so glad I did read this before going. It's Penko by Min Jin Lee. This is, this is not an unusual read. I'm sure there's tons of booktubers who talk about this book, but I just loved it. I loved this book. This is basically about Sunya, who lives with her family in what is now Busan. And she meets this man who is a very wealthy man who lives in Japan, but he is Korean. And she gets pregnant by him, and he goes, well, you can come live with me now. I already have a wife, but you can be my second wife, and I'll just take care of you. And she goes, no, I'm not doing that. I won't be bought. Which I was like, girl, go. And it's just about her family and the ramifications of her making that choice, and it shows the different lineages associated with Sunja. And the relationship between Korea and Japan, which wasn't fabulous. So glad I read this because it gave me a very good, very personal foundation as to what the relationship between Japan and Korea was. This was excellent because this was just a very personal account of how that relationship affected Koreans and Koreans living in Japan, because eventually a lot of her family and her lineage moves to Japan to work. Excellent. This was excellent. It was beautiful, and I want to talk about it more, but I gotta move on. Ooh, next we have a very, creepy. Ooh, it was creepy. It was weird. I had to read it. I had to read it for the book club. However, I had to miss this meeting, unfortunately, because of my trip to Korea. So I still read it, and I was so mad I had to miss the meeting because this book was so good. And it warranted discussion. I wanted to talk about this book with people. And it's called They by K. Dick. Shout out, first of all, to this publisher, McNally Editions. They create these great editions of books, and they're books that are kind of forgotten classics. They haven't been widely published, or they have been kind of forgotten, and they republish them in these really great editions. I'm matching it, by the way. So good. Yo, so good. This is an English book, and I think because it's English, that means a lot. It's an English book, and it's basically about these people. It's so hard to describe. It's basically short stories that are all interconnected, and it feels like a novel, but they're technically about different people in this, I want to say dystopian England. Is it dystopian? It's hard to describe, but it's basically a world where there's this amorphous, very silent, covert group that is watching everybody. They're watching for anybody to slip up, because in this world, art is banned, books are banned, a lot of anything creative or out of the norm is banned. And if you are caught doing these things, this group doesn't show outward violence, but just slowly approaches and encroaches on you. It is a claustrophobic, so uncanny, eerie book. I would say it's one of the creepier books I've read, because it's not like anything really scary happens. It's just stuff is below the surface, and you're I don't feel good. This doesn't feel good. It almost feels like the whole thing's in a minor key. You're something doesn't feel right. Definitely for it's a good winter fall book. This is excellent. So I would talk about it more, but again, I got other speed dates to go through here. The Monk by Matthew Lewis. I had done a video where I definitely talked about that I wanted to read this book, and I was it's just so heavy metal, and it delivered. This was heavy metal. This so good. This was so good. Oh my god. Basically, 19-year-old Matthew Lewis wrote this at the end of the 18th century. And it's excellent. It's about this monk who makes a big mistake. He makes a huge mistake. He breaks his vows, and it's all the ramifications that come with that. And I want to tell you, this book has everything. This book has robbers. This book has murder. This book has monks that seduce people, and the other way around. This has poison. It's got everything. It's got your damsels. It's got your heroes. It's so good. This was excellent. And I want to talk about this more. It's very gothic, very dark. gritty. And the ending I was like, yeah! Like, I was just like so into it. I was reading it on the train. I got off the train. I literally was walking down the steps from the train and crossing the street, and I was still reading it. And then I was reading it as I finished, and I was like, in front of the Walgreens, like, the monk! So good. So good. This was one of my favorites of the year. Definitely, if not top 5, maybe like number 6, because this was so fun. So, The Monk. Recommend. Highly recommend. Next one. Why did I blank on his name? I completely blanked on his name. Jorge. Jorge Luis Borges. How could I do that to him? Jorge Luis Borges' Labyrinths. Jeez. This is great. This is great. This is a collection of both his short stories and his essays. And I will say the short stories I loved. Super speculative, super, not sci-fi, just speculative. Like, they just were bringing up ideas more so than it was about the characters. I have to say, he lost me a little bit on the essays. I don't think that's his fault. I actually don't think it's his fault. I think I just wasn't smart enough to understand some of his essays. They would require a bit of, like, me really concentrating and reading. And I just, like, didn't. So some of them I think were a little lost on me, but the stories were excellent, and it makes me want to pick up Ficciones, which is just his collection of stories. I really want to get into those because this is excellent. So, Borges. He was good. He was a good time. Next up, Geek Love by Catherine Dunn. I don't see anybody talking about this book, and I don't know why. Like, why? This book was really good. It's a very strange book. Very, very strange. It's about the Panuski family. They are a family of carnies, essentially. They run a carnival. The parents have kind of engineered their children to be carnies. So they've done all sorts of stuff while the children were in utero, so they came out a little bit funky. One has, like, flippers for limbs. They have a set of Siamese twins. And then they have the main character's name is Ollie, and she's kind of this dwarf hunchback, albino hunchback, and she's at once so sympathetic but also frightening, because you kind of get into her mind and you realize, okay, yeah, she's got some ideas about things, mostly told through her eyes. This is a very character-driven book. There is a plot, but I'd say it's much more driven by the characters, their relationships, their flaws. So if you're into characters and really flawed characters, this'll do it. And this just gets messed up. This just gets so messed up. But excellent. This would be a great Halloween movie, a great companion to the movie Freaks, which I believe was made in 1932. Great movie if you've never seen that. This has a very similar feel. So, Geek Love. More stories about carnivals. Like, I love stuff about circuses, carnivals, clowns. I love anything that has to do with that. It's an odd, like, subgenre I like, but that definitely scratched that itch. Next up, I actually don't have this book with me. I lent it to my brother, and then I keep forgetting to get it back from him. And I'll put it here. It's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. Ooh, I read this on a vacation. I always pick, like, the lightest, happiest reads for my vacation. Have you ever noticed? I'm picking some dark books for my vacations. But I loved this. This was excellent. Also a novel written by a poet, so it felt very poetic, but it wasn't in verse. This is about Little Dog and him growing up with his mother and his grandmother, who have immigrated from Vietnam to the United States. And it's about his relationship also with this man, Trevor, who he works with on they work as field hands, essentially. It was so beautiful, so devastating. Especially the character of Trevor just broke my heart. It was so devastating and moving. The language was so beautiful that sometimes I was like, it's almost too much. Like, I wanted some things to be a little bit more concrete. But again, this wasn't a book really for the plot. It was more so for the language. But there are scenes in this book and things in this book that I will never stop thinking about. A particular conversation with his mother in a Dunkin' Donuts I think about often. There's a scene where, like, his grandmother is lifting him as a child to reach flowers on this freeway, and that's just, like, it's just stuff that stays with you. It, like, really sticks to you and stays with you. So I loved it. I actually just picked up from a little free library Night Sky with Exit Wounds, which is his poetry collection, so I'm looking forward to reading that. So, Unearthly Gorgeous. Mac, I will get that book from you at some point. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here, actually. I realized this is speed dating, but it's actually taking a lot longer than I thought it would, just because I'm so excited. So actually, I think I'm going to stop here, and we're going to make it a two-parter video. So there's just more to come. Some of my favorite books are coming up in the next one, so hopefully you'll stop by again. But thank you so much. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. Comment below what your favorite book was, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!